Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this. This is actually the third of my Your Cruise Questions Answered live session. So thank you very much for joining me. If you're joining me live, if you're watching this afterwards on YouTube as this kind of a replay, that's also great. If you are live, please feel free to post any questions, and I'll try and answer as many of those as I possibly can over the. Oh, sorry, I just realized I've got the sound going on there in the background of me going live. So if you are watching this live, please feel free to post any questions in the live chat, and I'll try and answer as many of those as I possibly can over the next hour of the live chat. If you're watching it afterwards on YouTube, you will find that I've added the chapters so you can actually jump to questions that are of particular interest to you. And if you're watching this or listening to this, should I say, on the podcast as well, that's also great. So there's lots of different ways of listening. So what I thought I would do, first of all, is just do a little bit of recap and run through a few bits and pieces, and then we'll get into the questions. So I'm going to answer questions that were posted on the channel over the last week, particularly in response to some of the most recent videos, and then give people a chance to post questions, and then we'll get into those as well. So first of all, I thought I'd give a couple of updates, and then I'll talk about a poll that I've been doing on the site. Those of you who might have joined me, I have also started doing a live cruise news updates video. And I stopped making videos of updates because it's all moving so very fast at the moment. So I've started doing a live session, which also gives us a great chance to chat about some of the things that people are thinking or reacting. Two really big updates from the updates. Does that make sense? Updates on the updates is after I did the live session, which I did on Friday, there was a big change, and I'd spoken about how I expected it to come. But as you've probably seen, is clear, the Cruise Line Association has announced that all of their cruise lines will not be sailing out of the US until at least the 15th of September this year. So the no-sail order, which was due to expire on the 25th of July, I guess the cruise lines have decided to just sort of understand that probably was going to be renewed anyway, sort of decided to get on the front foot. And we've seen strong suggestions of that because Norwegian had already cancelled most of those. Now, we'll find that things like Royal Caribbean and Carnival haven't officially announced what it means. But if you actually go to the Royal Caribbean site, you'll see they've removed all of the sailings up until the 15th of September. So on Monday, they're all saying they're going to announce the specifics. And I guess that gives them time to get into place, the refunds and all the terms and conditions, that kind of stuff. So really, really big updates, certainly out of the US. No ship sailing till at least the 15th of September, and we'll have to see what happens then. In Europe, we're seeing a massive big change as well. Two key things happening, one of which I covered on the updates. First of all, Spain has announced no cruise ships out of Spain with no time period to renew that. Now, hopefully they will start looking at that and renew it. But that's really important because Spain is a massive, big embarkation port for cruises in Europe. Those of you who've flown through Barcelona or been through Genoa will know that. It's also a really important, has some really, really important ports of call. So really, really, really big issue. On the good news, though, and again, I covered it a little bit more, is we have seen Norway cruising starting. We've seen Hurtigruten have started up sailing currently only for Norwegian passengers, calling on Norwegian ports. And we've also seen Seadream. They started their first cruise on Saturday, and that's headed out again with Norwegian passengers. And they have their second ship coming on stream as well. So we're seeing a few patches there. We saw a Rosa starting on Douro in Portugal. So kind of a tale of two cities, as it were, but largely speaking, it still looks like a way off before mainstream cruising starts. So that was, I thought I'd do a little bit of an update. One of the things that I did, and I'm going to bring it up right now, is what I'm going to do every week is run one of these polls. I've been running them sort of a little bit more ad hoc, but what I thought would be great to do for the cruise news, the cruise questions live, is to actually throw out a question to everybody, see where everybody's thinking, and build it into the session. And again, it's great to start when we start off the session to get people thinking. It also gives time for everyone to get on to this live stream and post their questions. So I posted a question because one of the things that had happened during the week is both Ponant and Virgin Voyages had published their view on new protocols that were going to come into place when they are allowed to start cruising. And one of the big messages that was in there very explicitly in both of those was about COVID-19 testing. What the Virgin Voyages protocol said, if you haven't seen that, is that they are looking to do a speedy test with all crew and all passengers before they board a Virgin Voyages cruise, which of course starts up with Scarlet Lady. At the moment, it's penciled in for October, and Valiant Lady will be in the Mediterranean, I think, from April or so. So their aim is to have a fast test. Now, what they do say in the protocols, they haven't quite locked that down, but the idea is before anybody boards, they would have a test. What Ponant is saying, and I've also seen it actually from Uncruise, which is a small ship cruise line operating in the United States, particularly in places like Alaska. Both of those have said is they will require a proof of a COVID test. So in the case of Ponant, that's going to be 48 hours before cruising, and I think it's roughly about the same for Uncruise. So what I asked people, as you can see down here, if I get my pointing right, so back right here where I'm pointing, I asked people what they thought. I've had 900 votes just about half an hour before we went live, with 63% saying they think it's a good idea, 21% disagreeing, and of course people still not sure where it all sits. What was very interesting in the discussion, a lot of people saying that they thought it was a great idea, or they certainly agreed with the idea, even if they didn't think it was a great idea, if it meant that cruises could get going. It was one way of breaking through this logjam. A lot of other people had concerns, or practical concerns, for example, which is one thing I've thought a lot about is, I might have a test 48 hours before, but then I'm going to go through the whole process, perhaps of flying to Miami or whatever, and I could obviously come into contact with, and pick it up in between then. So it wasn't necessarily completely fail-safe. So there's also concern around that area, how valid would it be if it was done before? And the other question, which I don't know the answer to, which I'm going to see if I can find out, that came up quite a lot, is who is going to pay for the tests? So what I've seen, for example, is some countries like Iceland, for example, have just opened to international travelers, but you either go into quarantine for 14 days or you have a test at the airport and you have to pay yourself for that test. So what we don't yet know is, are cruise lines going to be covering the cost of the test or expecting you to, cover the cost yourself? So that's a poll I'm going to do. And if you ever have any suggestions for other polls and things, I'm going to do a poll every single week and build it into here so we get a read of where people are feeling on a topical issue. And also it's great because it makes this even more two-way. So let me take a quick dive into some of the comments, and then I have a whole bunch of questions that I've got from the channel as well that I'll try and address as well. So lots of welcome. We've seen great people, Jack from Texas, Gary P from Ohio, Pascal, I'm not sure where you are, Pascal. Jocelina's joined again. Jocelina was on the one we had the other day on news, who is a crew member on Princess, still waiting for news on that, and safety briefings and future cruise credits. So I'm going to come back to those in a bit because I think it leads on a little bit. Remember, and Hetty's also joined. Hi, Hetty. Hetty's very good. She's, I think, been to all of my live sessions, so that's really, really great. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to touch on some of the questions that I've had on the channel so far. And again, if you do have any questions, please feel very free to pop them into the chat, and I'll try and address as many of those as I can. What I'm trying to do is kind of find questions that group together and answer those together as one go. So I thought I might just touch on a couple of questions that I've got off the channel, again, giving people a chance to post questions. And over the last couple of weeks, I've posted a whole bunch of videos, some which were about cabins and cabin choices, and some are around everything that's going on with future cruise credits and rebooking, etc. But I wanted to touch on this one. I've actually touched on it a couple of times. Jenny had left a question on the channel, and quite a few people have asked a similar question linked to something that I've spoken about before. Is we booked 3 cruises, but we've now found it's cheaper somewhere else, or it's cheaper. So what can we do to get the cheaper price? Now, this is a really key issue, because I think we're going to see, I believe anyway, we're going to see more and more as things progress and as cruising does eventually come back into place, we are going to see volatility of prices. So I've seen, for example, I've got some cruises in January and March, etc., and I have seen prices coming down since I have booked. So to Jenny's question, what can you do about it? Well, first of all, you need to make sure that you know if prices are coming down. And what I do is I always set up a price alert, and these are free to do. So you can either do it through Cruise Critic, where you search for your cruise and it gives you the option to do price alert, and it will send you a price alert if prices start to fall for that particular for that particular cruise. Or you can actually go to another site, which is I really like as well, and I actually use this one mostly, which is called Cruise Watch, so cruisewatch.com. And again, you search for your cruise. You can also do it for a whole region if you like. And you put in your cruise. So for example, I have a cruise with Enchanted Princess in January. I booked it a while ago. I have a balcony cabin. Enchanted Princess is one of the new Princess ships, which is delayed, so we don't know when it's going to come into play. So at the moment, it should be up and running by January. Anyway, I have booked a balcony cabin in the Caribbean, and I have had 2 rounds now of alerts through Cruise Watch saying the prices have gone down. So to Jenny's point, what do you do if that happens? So first of all, you get the alert. So that's an easy way of doing it. So you don't have to check yourself. You can, of course, keep checking, and you can get your travel agent or whatever to check for you. I find that really helpful. Verify, just go and check online if you were to book the same thing. Then what you need to do is, if you've booked through a travel agent, contact them and ask them to follow it through. Or if you've booked directly with the cruise line, contact the cruise line. And you might have to be a little bit patient because obviously the call centers are very busy. Tell them that you booked at price X, whatever that is, say 100. You now see it's being sold for 90, and ask them what they're going to do. So some of the cruise lines are being quite good in that, actually lowering the fares. So I've seen that happen, for example, with Virgin Voyages. They have actually reduced fares, and they've been quite good. Actually, they've come and told you the fares are going down, and they've done it proactively. Saga Cruises is another one that does that. Most cruise lines don't tell you that. So what you then do is contact the cruise line, tell them that you've seen this difference, and ask them what they're going to do. So you might find, for example, Royal Caribbean at the moment is actually lowering your fare, which is great news, because that's kind of straight away money effectively back in your bank, as it would be, because you haven't paid your final balance yet. Or they will do something else. So what I've mostly found happen is I've been offered an upgrade or some extra onboard credit or something like that. But that's basically what you should actually absolutely be doing. So let's just have a quick dive back into the comments. So lots of very nice comments. I want to pick up on, because I've just seen Harry Ann Irwin asking a question. Hi, Harry Ann. So made some very nice comment about the channel, which is always great to hear. Thank you very much. Good to hear that. So Harry Ann's asking, do you think that ocean cruising will fluctuate more than river? And I'm assuming you're talking about prices. It's very interesting, because I think probably we will see ocean. My gut feeling is ocean will fluctuate more, partly just because there is so much more kind of choice, so much more variance, and more and bigger ships to fill. We're going to find, I think, with European river cruising, we've already seen it already with some of them starting, is, the ships by definition are much smaller. The fleets aren't massive fleets, although there is more and more competition, but there's relatively limited supply already. So you'll find often with river cruising, you have to book a long way ahead, particularly at peak times. So if you want to go, in summer next year, or summer even the year after, booking really early becomes important, because, capacity is much more restricted. Also, because they are traveling in local areas, I think we're going to see people are going to be much more comfortable, because they don't have to fly long haul, they don't have to travel long distances. So, particularly people in the EU, in Europe, you don't fly there. Even from the UK, you can go through the Eurotunnel or trains or whatever to get to it. So I think we're going to see the supply and demand situation much more stable there. And I certainly I haven't been tracking it as carefully, river cruising, but I haven't seen lots of noise, and I haven't seen the travel agents I know haven't spoken a lot about lots of variance in river cruising. Again, a lot of it depends when it starts up, but certainly my sense is ocean cruising does feel to be, at this point in time, much more kind of volatile than anything else. So let me just pick up with KB, on, because it sort of links a little bit back to what we talk about on protocols. Is I'm getting worried for our Symphony cruise on October the 3rd. I blame it on the CDC not engaging in serious talks with the cruise lines over the safeguards they will have in place already. I think it's very interesting as we look at the point with the CDC. Just to clarify, in case you don't know, the CDC, Center for Disease Control, is what has influence over all of the cruise lines operating in and out of the US. So you have to follow those rules. But every region has their own, every country has their own. And one of the challenges I think the cruise lines are facing is getting that engagement. So we've seen not only the CDC, to KB's point, has not been particularly positive or enthusiastic about engaging with the cruise industry, it would seem. I mean, even only recently they were still meeting about repatriating the cruise. So there certainly seems a fair degree of hostility. We've seen in the US quite a lot of the travel organizations writing kind of open letters to the CDC around getting engagement. So we're not seeing noises of lots of engagement. However, I think we're seeing the same thing outside of the US as well. So in the UK, for example, where you've got some really big lines based like P&O Cruises, you've got Cunard based out of the UK. They had already cancelled all their cruises through to September, way before what happened, excuse me, with the CDC. Cunard's only talking already about October, and engaging again with Public Health England, which is the equivalent they'd have to do. We saw the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, talking at a recent press conference when he was asked a question about how he wants to work with the cruise industry, but we're not seeing lots and lots of momentum. When Spain made their announcement, they specifically referred to the EU CDC, which is still giving advice, saying that they see cruising as a challenge. So engagement is definitely an ongoing challenge. I think you're right. October, certainly the announcement the CLIA organization made, if you look at the CLIA announcement, that they kind of, I felt, if you read the announcement, I'll maybe try and put a link in, you get the sense that they're expecting this thing to keep going and keep moving. I do want to answer this question because this is a really good one. So Shaharina, hope I've pronounced that correctly. This is a really interesting question, very, very interesting question, and quite positive news on this front. Do you think smaller cruise lines that are not in CLIA, such as Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line, will follow the September the 15th extension as well, or do they still have a good chance of sailing? There's two points to that. First of all, the CDC in the US, the no-sail order is only for ships over 200 passengers. Now, I need to double check, there might be 250 passengers. So basically it's only 200 passengers or more. So if you carry fewer than 200 passengers, you're not covered by the no-sail order. So what we've actually seen is there's a new organization's been formed, which includes a lot of the river cruising companies in the US, the ones that operate up and down the Mississippi, the American steamboat company called American Cruise Line, and Uncruise, which has small ships. Now, Uncruise have actually announced and put on sale cruises starting next month in Alaska. And the point being that they are able to sail because they are not subject to the no-sail order. Now, what we have seen, however, is some of the river cruise lines in the US that were going to sail because they don't fall under the CDC and they are less than 200. They've actually just pulled their river cruises off because there was a spike in COVID cases in the territories and the states that were in the sail through. So they've pulled it off sail, not related to a CDC issue. When it comes to the Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line, I think I'm right in saying their ships are a couple of hundred. So they fall under the CDC rules. So I guess theoretically, if you're not a member of CLIA, you could do. However, the CDC rules will preempt whatever that is. So I think we have to keep a real watch on what the CDC are going to do. I think there's every expectation that the CDC will expand from that date of 25th of July. But you're right to say, absolutely correct, Sharina, it was the CLIA organization that brought that out. So for example, there's a couple of big cruise lines that are not part of CLIA. So Viking Cruises, for example, is not part of CLIA. So they are not part of that decision. They will have to make decisions based on other things like the CDC, etc. So it's quite an interesting one with that. So the big lines are definitely part of CLIA and will follow that. I'll pick up on this while I'm talking about sort of changes, etc. So KCS, I've seen information from Royal Caribbean that the buffet will stay, but it won't be self-serve. This is something that we are seeing pretty much every cruise line that has started to talk about protocols doing. Now, if you've been on a cruise ship where there has been an outbreak, say, of norovirus, you'll know the protocol where basically self-service gets withdrawn. And I think we are absolutely going to see the same thing when it comes to post-COVID-19 cruising, is that the staff in the buffets will serve the food. There was a little bit of confusion originally, about a month or so ago, when there was a press conference, or was it an earnings call, where someone in Royal Caribbean said what sounded like that buffets were going to be removed entirely and it was all going to be served. And then a clarification was put out within a week, within a few days, saying, they weren't saying they were going to scrap buffets, it's the way that buffets were going to work. So you're certainly going to see the Windjammer or whatever it is on the different cruise lines is going to operate, but it will be served by people. Now, if you've been on, say, some cruise lines, like even on America to a degree, where large amounts of it are already served. I was on a cruise, I was actually on an America cruise, actually, when the original shutdown started. So we sailed for about 4 or 5 days after the shutdown to get back to Miami. But when we boarded that cruise, there was no self-service. It was, in the buffet, which was operating, everything was served to you. Even if you wanted fruit juice, it was poured for you, handed to you. On the tables, the condiment stuff was removed off the tables. If you wanted a roll, that was served to you. So I think absolutely that is what we are definitely going to see as one of the key changes. But buffets will stay. In all the updates, Norwegian Cruise Line issued some updates about 3-4 weeks ago. I did a video about that if you want to go and see more detail on that, where they spoke about that thing. We've seen it with the Ponant stuff. Virgin referred to it, although they didn't have a formal buffet. They have sort of they don't have a traditional buffet. They have sort of more like a food hall concept, where they were serving people stuff, making stuff to order and serving it. So I think the old days of with your tongs and stuff are absolutely going to be gone. This Jack Wise talking about cruise lines do not pay US corporate taxes. Their operations do not generate tax revenue for both the federal government and local governments. This is definitely one of the key issues that has been debated a lot when it comes to cruising and taxes. They are registered cruise companies are with, I think, certainly in the US, there's no cruise, I guess, uncruise, and some of the smaller cruise lines are incorporated. So when we say cruise lines, we're talking about the major cruise lines. So we're talking about Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian, those cruise lines, which are sort of headquartered in the US, but they are have their official offices for tax purposes in tax havens like, I think, Cayman Islands, Liberia, Panama, those kind of places. So their whole tax structure is absolutely different. They don't pay, their effective tax rate is much lower in the US, and of course they will pay, whatever other taxes and income tax on people employed. And one of the key reasons that the cruise line in the United States have not received any assistance when the bailouts happened. Of the airlines, American Airlines, United, Delta, they got bailouts. The reason that the cruise lines didn't get any bailouts is that act, or whatever it was called, law, whatever it was called, specifically said you had to be incorporated within the US. There are, of course, cruise lines, smaller cruise lines that are actually incorporated in the US. Heather Travels has asked a question. Given the new unified position of CLIA members, do you predict that all cruise lines will begin sailing at basically the same time out of the US, or could there still be a variation? I can tell you what I do know, because I think the cruise lines have been relatively clear about how cruising is going to start. I think the minute the cruise lines are able to start, they want to start, and they've made that clear. They want to start as soon as they can, as soon as protocols are agreed, and as soon as they can get whatever changes are in place. However, what we are not going to see, because they've all made it very clear, is we're not going to see all of the ships that were due to come on sale, start sailing, all start sailing at the same time. What all of the CEOs, all the cruise lines have spoken about is ramping up the process. So I think we might see them all start at the same time because they are able to, and the protocols are agreed, but they will bring in and phase in ships because, of course, at the moment they're still repatriating crew, back. So they still have to make sure the ships are back. A lot of the ships are still across in parts of Europe. There's lots of ships even in the UK, still in parts of Europe. There's lots of ships in the Philippines, India. So they still have to get some of the ships back to where they need to sail. They need to get crew back, and they need to bring them, slowly but surely back on stream, because a lot of them have gone to cold layup, which means less crew. They're not ready to be sort of switched on and stocked up and get ready to going. So I think we'll see the cruise lines coming back, because they'll all want to start once they can, but you won't find it all singing and dancing. What Arnold Donald has said, who's the head of the Carnival Corporation, is also that they want to try and keep prices. They don't want prices to collapse too much. So one of the attractions for them about bringing ships on, in a more steady fashion, is they can also manage supply and demand, or match supply and demand a little bit more, so they can kind of not let fares collapse as much as they did in the financial crisis. Prices were crazy at that time. In 2008, there was, cruise prices were like phenomenally good. So I want to pick on something on the CMV group. So those of you who don't know CMV is Cruise and Maritime, and they have been in the news over the last 24 hours, 48 hours, and this week quite a bit. So Cleo is saying, I'm going with CMV Columbus on the 31st of August 2020 British Isles from Tilbury, UK. What are your thoughts of our chances of going? Let me just update. You might not have seen the news on CMV. There's two big pieces of news, one of which is they are looking for money at the moment. They were unable to get some of the government loans, and they are out looking for money. So they that's one of the challenges they have, is getting money. Secondly, most of their ships are currently actually in Tilbury, and they were boarded, and actually the ships were held by the equivalent of the Coast Guard in the UK. It's some maritime group. And they were going on board to investigate some issues and complaints that the crew were making about the way they were being treated. So a lot of them have been stuck on board for a very long time. There was reports of them not being paid because their contracts had finished, but they also can't get back home because there is restrictions on flights heading back home. So they were boarded, and one of the ships was impounded briefly because it was due to set sail. And so their ships, as of now, and it might have changed in the last hour or two, I haven't seen any more news, but their ships were actually being held and not allowed to move while this whole thing gets investigated. So there's that whole thing going on. Secondly, we're not seeing any movement in the UK towards opening up big public venues. So we're expecting to see in the UK announcements this week that from the 4th of July, some pubs, there might be a reduction in social distancing from 2 meters to 1 meter. Some pubs may be able to open, some restaurants may be able to open. We're hearing that theatres are probably not going to be able to open until next year. So I don't know anything, but the signs to me say it's extremely unlikely that the Public Health England will sign off on cruises allowing to board passengers as early as August. As I mentioned, the other cruise lines have cancelled way into October. So I would be very surprised personally. I mean, I don't know. I'm just looking at what the omens are. I would be very surprised if you do see that going. Let me jump back briefly at some of the other questions I had from the channel, and then I'll come back to some of the other questions. I see some developing around certain themes there. I'd mentioned a couple of things on cabins, so this is jumping slightly askew to what's going to happen and how soon it's going to happen. But I did a video I have a series of videos about cabins and suites, and somebody has asked, in fact, a few people asked me, if I want to do more videos about what cabins are good, and absolutely, I will do that. So one of the things that I really, really like a lot, the reason I put this question up, is I really love it when people send me ideas or requests for videos, because it means that I know what people are looking for, and I can make videos around things that I know there's kind of a ready audience for. So if you ever have a topic that you want covered, if there's anything that you would like me to review or do, let me know. So, for example, there's this one on cabins, which I've actually recorded and I'm working on in much more detail. That'll be out soon. But there was, for example, I'd asked people what cruise lines they wanted me to look at, and the number one cruise line came back was Virgin. So what I'd arranged to go this year, of course, that's fallen through. So next year I'm going to go on Virgin, Scarlet Lady. Next year I'm going to go on Valiant Lady, so I can do a whole series around Virgin. So that letting me know what you want me to cover is really helpful. So in terms of Luke asked the question, can you do a video on what cabins are good? What I thought I would do is just tell you I have a very, very simple test for whether you're inside, ocean view, suite, balcony, whatever you are. The way that I look at when I choose a cabin is I look for a cabin which is surrounded on all sides, except for the ocean side, by other cabins. So cabins above, cabins below, cabins either side, and ideally cabins opposite. And the reason for that is you're probably going to guarantee yourself a cabin which is in a location you're kind of surrounded by other cabins. You're not going to be near loud venues. You're not going to be necessarily near high traffic areas. You're basically going to have a cabin that is sort of buffered, if you like, from all potentially bad things. Now, there's many, many more little nuances to that. But if you're going to remember one thing about choosing a great cabin, that for me is the key thing. Cabins on all sides. That's my one absolute little tip. So that was, let me just go back and take that one off. So let me go back and have a look at some of the questions that we're seeing running through. Heather's got a follow-up question about repatriating crew. Following up on what you said about, excuse me, still repatriating crew, could getting crew back or hiring new crew be a major obstacle because of travel restrictions? Heather, what we're seeing is that is definitely a challenge. One of the things I keep an eye on is obviously what the cruise lines are saying and doing. You can also track where ships are. The other thing I keep an eye on is a site which is called Crew Center, Crew-Center, CENTER. They have a really active group on Facebook, and they have a site as well. And what's great about that is it's run by crew members for crew members. So they post a lot around what's happening with repatriation, etc. Normally before this whole pandemic time, there was lots of stuff about recruiting and that kind of stuff. So what we're seeing, so that's one good way of seeing what's happening. At the moment, as you said, the big focus is still on repatriating crew. However, what we're starting to see is a few signs of people trying to get crew back. So MSC Cruises I saw some stuff last week where they're starting to recruit crew to potentially join ships during July with the idea of training them up to hopefully be looking at sailing in August. I haven't been able to find out how much or how many crew members they're looking for, but definitely there's some noise there. Costa have approached on some of their ships, a couple of their ships, not many ships, but which I picked up actually in Crew Center as well, is they've approached people whose contracts are due to expire, and they've asked them if they will extend their contracts so they don't leave the ship. Or some people are still on the ship waiting for repatriation, if they will take out new contracts, i.e. stay on the ship. So it's clear that some of the cruise lines, particularly focused in the Mediterranean kind of area, are trying to get around that problem of repatriating crew. What we're seeing in Europe specifically, and I'll come back to the US at the moment, is many of the countries in Europe which have quarantine restrictions are starting to lift those. So we're seeing, for example, Spain are lifting them. The UK still has a 14-day quarantine if you're coming into the UK. But there is lots of expectation that will start to fall away over the coming weeks and months. I think France is dropping this. So most of the EU borders and movement between the EU is dropping, and some of the international ones are dropping. So we're starting to see that one of the big challenges of international flights bringing crew in is starting to lift in the Mediterranean. However, when it comes to the US, that's more of a challenge. So, for example, if you're a UK or EU resident, you still can't head into the UK. I know there's been some movement on some of the flights from Asia. So this definitely is one of the challenges, and that's one of the things that Arnold Donald also spoke about getting ships up and running is, the volume, when you see the numbers of crew, it is definitely a big challenge. But there's certainly some signs that although most of the movement is one way, heading, getting crew back, there is some signs that people are looking at trying to keep crew on or find ways of bringing crew back. But it's definitely going to be, absolutely definitely going to be a logistical challenge. I'm going to pick up on, and let's move slightly aside. I'm going to ask some of the questions which are around actually, getting back out and cruising. So Jordan has asked this question about any tips on getting good prices on Antarctic cruises. So I do have some tips on that. So one of the things I'm trying to do, because a lot of people say that, is I know I talk very fast. When I'm videoing my videos, I've learned to talk slow. I've realized, also listening back to some of these live streams, as I start to talk very fast, so I'm trying to make myself slow down. So Jordan, Antarctica. So one of the critical things with getting good prices on Antarctica is planning, thinking way, way, way ahead. So I went to Antarctica last year in February, and I booked that about 18 to 2 years ahead. I'm going back to Antarctica in November. Well, I'm booked to go to Antarctica in November. Who knows if that will happen at this stage, if things will be moving by then. But again, I booked that, would have been like 20 months ahead. So planning way in advance is the absolute key. So, I mean, it's a big cost anyway, so you probably want to be budgeting and saving. So time is really important. So when the cruise lines put Antarctica sails on, and they often sell them 2 years ahead, that's the time to book. That's the time when you're going to get the sharpest price, because often you're still paying quite a big deposit, so it's still quite out up front, because the fares are quite high. So that's definitely the one thing. The other thing that I've done, which is how I've got both of those trips, the one I did and the one I booked, is I was doing both of those solo. So I wasn't traveling with my partner on those. So I had the other challenge of traveling solo. So what I did is I signed up for all of the sort of polar cruise lines that I was interested in. I signed up for their newsletters and waited for promotions to come along. Now, I was specifically looking for solo travel promotions because that was really important to me. And I managed to get really, really good deals with the one I did in February, which was with Silversea. I think I got like a 10% premium. The next one I'm doing on Ponant, there was no bonus. And what was important about both of those, which is sort of linked to the whole thing, so you sign up for the promotions. So the promotions are likely to focus on the beginning and the end of the season. So the Antarctic season starts up in November and ends for most of the cruise lines at the end of February, March, beginning of March time. Now, some of the cruise lines will go into March. That is when you will get the sharpest prices. Most people want to go to Antarctica in December, January, partly because that's when it's the warmest, it's the peak season. I mean, warmest obviously in relative terms. The weather is probably more stable. That, so you might have less disruption in terms of landings. It's also really good from the wildlife's perspective. You're going to see lots of the penguins when the chicks are still growing up. So so you'll find less people want to go at the beginning, also because the weather can be rougher. So again, if you're looking for good prices, focus on the sort of November cruises, focus on the sort of February cruises as well, because that's where you're going to find the sharper prices. Pluses and minuses, if you go in November, bear in mind, Antarctica's had no one there through the whole winter season. So you're absolutely going to be absolutely pristine, and it's pretty pristine anyway. If you go in the late February time, it's a very, very good time for seeing whales. The penguin chicks and stuff, if they've sort of all grown up, so you're not going to see lots of little chicks around. You will see loads of penguins, but you will see a lot of whales. So on our trip I did in February, we had the most phenomenal whale sightings. So those are my key tips. The other thing to do is, again, look at the wide spread, obviously, of different cruise lines, because there's lots of variances, but also work with a specialist cruise agent as well, because there are increasingly cruise agents that focus on the polar region. So, for example, what I've been working on for the one that I did, the one before I did direct. The one I'm working on is with a company called Polar Routes. So they, as the name would suggest, they focus on they focus on Arctic and Antarctica. And what they do, because they're such a big player, is they often will have various deals or promotions which are perhaps not made as public. So if the cruise line has a couple of cabins they want to sell, they don't want to go out and advertise that they're marking down cabins, because obviously that whole thing we spoke about, people come back and ask for the money back. So sometimes through some of the big agents that they work with, they might sort of say, look, we've got a couple of cabins on the sailing, do you have any clients interested? So that would be kind of my fourth tip, is work with one of those, let them know that's what you want to do, and your flexibility, and get them to kind of hunt out those big deals. So let's have a look at, someone asked me a question, sorry, completely aside. Someone asked me a question earlier about this ship in the background. I'll see if I can find, here we go. That's Heather. Where did I get this beautiful model behind me? It's actually, this model behind me is the QE2, and I also have one of the Queen Mary 2. I actually found those originally on eBay. In being a geek, I kept searching for models, etc., and they were surprisingly inexpensive. Now, I have seen other people who've got those. The guy who used to make them, I think, unfortunately has passed away, so I haven't seen recently, but they were not crazy expensive. They are very beautifully done. But that's how I found them, is basically keeping out a lookout on eBay. So that's my little tip there. But they are amazing. They are amazing models. They're absolutely amazing models. So thanks very much to Cami, my good friend Cami, who's left a super chat. Thank you very much for that. So Cami, we met. The other thing I like, I was saying about, I love it when people send me suggestions for videos. The other thing that I really, really like is when I go on cruises and people come up to me because they watch the channel, they recognize me from the channel. And Cami was one of those, and we have a great picture of us there. And so Cami was asked, so sorry, that was my point. So I love it when people come up and say hello. So what I often find when I'm on a cruise is people come up to me on the very last day, like at the captain's farewell party or whatever, there's some do at the end, and say, oh, you're Gary Bembridge, we watch your videos. But they tell me on the very, very last day. So what was great with Cami is right on the very first day, I think it was a sail away party. So please, if you ever do see me on a ship, please do come and say hello. I love, it's great to meet people. So what's Cami saying? So with the CDC not engaging the cruise lines, is it possible ships will be pulled from the start/end in the US and rerouted to stop in a Caribbean or Mexican port? It's interesting. This is a question that I've had quite a lot, and I guess the challenge, though, is that whole fly cruise challenge. It's interesting because what we've seen all of the CEOs say, and I think Richard Fain said it this week. Richard Fain's really interesting, actually. Richard Fain, he's the CEO of Royal Caribbean, and he puts out a video, I would say roughly every 10 days, maybe every second week, which is really targeted at travel agents. But they are really, really interesting because he's very honest and very enlightening. So on YouTube, if you just search Richard Fain, F-A-I-N-E, I can't remember the name of the channel offhand, but his videos are worth watching. But what the point he makes is that because as travel starts to slowly unlock, the whole process of flying is going to be a real pain, the whole process of going through security, etc. So they are trying to focus and their plans on restarting as much as possible with the drive to ports. So, that means your Miamis, I guess your Tampas, your Galvestons, all those kind of places where there are local pockets of people that can get on a cruise. So I think there's probably not a lot of energy for that. I guess at some point in time, cruise lines may have to make that decision. And I don't know the rules in the US around people calling in the US. I assume they can call on ports in the US which haven't originated. They must be able to do that, I guess, because World Cruises will do that. They'll head off from Southampton and call into US ports. So I think there's probably not a lot of energy from the cruise lines. They certainly, everything they've said, they're not looking at that. The other challenge, of course, which I think is probably a huge challenge, is when I've heard the cruise line executives talking before about when they choose ports with a phenomenally big international or hub airport, because the volume of people and I guess the volume of crew that churn through those ports is enormous. So you need a big infrastructure. So it's the infrastructure may just not be there to create with thousands and thousands of passengers coming in and out of those. So I haven't seen any enthusiasm. I haven't seen anything talking about them looking at that. If anything else, what I have seen is almost the opposite, where what we're seeing, as I said with that Norway example, Ponant, so local cruises for local people is where people drive to. So Ponant, for example, which runs very exotic cruises around the world, have expedition cruises. They run these very beautiful cruises all over the place. What Ponant are doing, because they're French-based, is they are negotiating with the French government to run cruises around France for French passengers. We've seen some of the cruise lines in the UK talking about how they're looking, so in fact, not even based in the UK, like Viking, for example, Hurtigruten is another example. They're talking about creating cruises for, say, UK-only passengers around the UK. Hurtigruten are talking about, because they've started the Norway run again, they're talking about creating and negotiating with the German government to run a ship which takes German passengers out of German port up to Norway. The passengers won't be able to get off in Norway, but they will be able to, do scenic cruising through the fjords, do stuff on the water, kayaking, whatever, head back to Germany. So I think there's still that sense of, I think we're more like to see the local cruises for the people not having to fly market than the other one. So again, I don't have any information, just the sort of the noises, etc. that I am seeing. Great. So we've got very diverse people from Toronto. Heather from Toronto, Jimmy from Chicago. Good big tip from Heather actually is the Royal Caribbean blog. So I've forgotten, is it Matt? I've forgotten his name. It's a great blog. He runs it's a fan site called Royal Caribbean blog. He runs a blog. He has a YouTube channel, and he posts the Richard Fain videos. So that's another way of tracking those down. So let's have that was the point that I just made. Eric raising that point from Cami, because I don't know the infrastructure, because that's a really good point that Eric's raising actually, because one of the things that I hadn't really thought about when I was answering that question is, the volume of stuff. So at an embarkation port is when a cruise ship will take on their supplies. So if you're going on a 7-day cruise out of Miami, or even a 2-week cruise out of Southampton, or even some of the longer cruises, month-long cruises, all the supplies are taken on board at the embarkation port. So the logistics of bringing everything on board in a port which you're not sailing out of, I guess, is actually just kind of astronomical from that perspective. Let me go back up and have a check if I haven't missed any questions, as I've sort of answered some of the other questions. Justina's asked a question about medical exams, and you've dropped me a note on my Facebook page, and I'll come back to that. Here's a really good question as well, which Eileen, I think pronounce it, Eileen reviews. This is a question about future cruise credit. Now, one of the things that has happened is if you took future cruise credit instead of the cash option, the future cruise credits all had expiry dates. Now, when they first started, they were actually expiring at the end of 2021. So you had to cruise next year. And what Eileen is asking is, do you think my future cruise credit will be extended by Royal Caribbean? I canceled my April 2020 cruise myself on the final payment date. And this is before the Sail with Confidence program started. It's only valid for 1 year. Eileen, I would double check particularly with Royal Caribbean on their page. They've actually updated their page in the last weekend. So again, wait till they've announced the next round of changes, which I think they said they were going to do on Monday. Have a look how they've updated the page. What I've seen with all of the cruise lines as cruising has got shifted back is they've also shifted back expiry date of future cruise credits. And I mean, someone might pick me up on that. I haven't seen anyone that hasn't shifted it. The only one that I found hadn't shifted it that had expired and was going to expire was Virgin. So my Virgin, I'd taken the future cruise credit, I'd got the bonus, I booked another cruise which came in under the bonus, I had balance left, and it had an expiry date, which they had not moved. However, what they were open to do is enabling you to book a cruise, to use the future cruise credit towards that, even though it was going to expire. So one of the things you might want to look at is, first of all, look at that page, because I think you will find it's changed. And Royal Caribbean have, of all the cruise lines I've seen, been one of the most fluid and flexible in allowing things like, the future cruise credit to be rolled over, expanded, used against deposits, that kind of stuff. So I would first of all do that. Secondly, what I would then do is either whether you've done it directly, something about directly, or through your travel agent, is ask that thing that I did with Virgin is, okay, my future cruise credit is expiring by that date. However, if I book a cruise before that expires, can I then still apply that to the cruise? So that's what happened, is I'm actually going on a cruise after my future cruise credit has expired, but because I've booked a cruise, obviously the deposits and stuff's come off that, so I don't have very much left against the final balance. They've let it roll over. So have that negotiation. That's a little tip that I found, because originally they know it's going to expire, it's like a waste of money. And then I just asked the question, and they definitely moved from that. So Jocelina asked a question again about protocols and the boat drill emergency. We have not seen, so the question is, what we're seeing all the cruise lines talking about, certainly as they start up. So we saw Norwegian talk about it, we've seen Uncruise talk about it, we've seen all the river cruise lines doing it, we've seen Virgin talking about it, we've seen Ponant talking about it. Everybody in their new protocols that they're talking about have spoken about reducing the number of passengers on a ship, certainly in the early days. And that is to allow, sort of just by natural, whatever would the right word be, just naturally allow more social distancing. So they're going to have fewer passengers on board. So they're not going to sail full. And they've also said very explicitly that they are going to do things like control the number of people in the dining rooms, either by building in more frequent dining time. So if it's fixed dining, they might have more, or they might actually control entry into, they only allow X amount of people in the buffet at any one time, so people can spread out more. They're also talking about, limiting the amount of people in the theatre, limiting the amount of people attend a facility. So I can't remember the number. I think it was in Ponant or whatever, they're talking about only 50% of a certain number will be allowed in the fitness centre at a time. So they're all talking about managing those kinds of things, but not one of them has mentioned this point that Jocelino said about the muster drill, because clearly the muster drill, as we know, is everyone gets herded together. Very early on, we saw some trademarks being registered by Royal Caribbean, which is around e-muster, and there was lots of speculation that there was some looking at doing a more virtual or online or in your stateroom. But to answer your question is, we have heard nothing explicitly about the boat drills. And I suspect once they eventually lock down a protocol with the CDC, because I guess that's also a maritime safety issue, so I guess the maritime people will be involved, is how that muster drill will be managed. Because clearly, if there is going to be some sense of social distancing or spreading out of people, it's going to be very difficult to do that. But the direct answer is we have seen nothing. And it's one of those things that's very interesting that it has been quite so quiet on that front. So let me take a look at some other quick questions around booking and so on. Scopex Beast. I booked a cruise for this summer. What will happen as I haven't cancelled it yet? So I'm guessing that may be, it doesn't really matter where I was trying to think if the region made a difference. I don't think it does. This may answer your question or may not answer your question, but what I would say to people, and this is what I'm doing myself with cruises, is if you have a cruise, don't cancel it. And someone referred, I can't remember who it was, someone said it earlier, where it was a question about Royal Caribbean that we had earlier about they cancelled before the cruise with confidence. My advice to you is, if you have a cruise, don't cancel it. Hold your nerve and wait. Wait until the cruise line cancels it. Now, the reason for that is a couple of things. If the cruise line cancels it, first of all, if you have a non-refundable deposit or whatever, you're not going to lose that. If cruise lines applying that most amount. But very importantly, you're going to normally be given a choice. So if you're anywhere other than some of the countries in Europe, you're going to be given a choice. You're going to be given a choice of getting a cash refund, or you're going to be given a choice of taking future cruise credit with a bonus. So the norm is, it seems to be settling down now at about 25%. It'd be interesting to see if they still keep the 25%. When Virgin originally cancelled, it was 200%. So you get a bonus, and you get a choice of deciding, do you want to take the cash or do you want the future cruise credit? If you cancel yourself, you're not really going to have that option. So that's the one thing. I would wait till the cruise line because it's going to give you the most amount of choice. However, and this is again a personal decision, but if your final balance becomes due, you need to really think very hard if you think the cruise is going to be cancelled. What I'm personally doing, and again, everyone's different, is if and when a final balance comes due and I look at a cruise a couple of months ahead, I'm not paying the final balance. I'm actually using the option, which is now with all the flexible booking going on, to move my cruise. The reason for that is I don't want to pay over thousands of dollars to a cruise line, which will then cancel for a cruise that I think may be cancelled. So coming back to my Antarctic example, that's in November. I don't know if it's going to happen. I have to pay it around about August time. If there's not absolute certainty that the cruise is going to go, I will look, I think, almost certainly to move that, because I don't want to pay over thousands of dollars, because most of the cruise lines at the moment, you're waiting up to 90 days to get your money back. So so I would say hold on, wait to see what the cruise line does, wait to see if it's absolutely definitely going to happen, and then you have the flexibility. If it's future cruise credit, if it's future balance time, then you have to think really carefully. Do you really want to hand over money, or is it better just to move? And I think certainly this year, it's really uncertain what's happening. There's no certainty. If I was in Norway as a Norwegian citizen and I wanted to go cruising, I would have no problems because I know Hotel Cruise is already up and running. I know that Seadream are already running. And if I'm booked with those two cruise lines, I would be perfectly fine. So I hope that's answered your question. Don't book, wait is the absolute key thing. So I'll answer two quick questions and then we'll wrap because we're heading up for the first hour. I want to ask a quick question, Michael, which links back to something I was saying at the beginning. With Spain closed to cruises indefinitely, what are the odds Silver Spirit will sail from Barcelona on October the 7th? Would they reposition to a European port that is open? What I can say at this moment is we don't know. What Spain has said is ports are closed, so absolutely at this point in time, and there's no date to review it. So it's a wait and see. So nobody knows. I'm pretty sure that Silver Sea will be really looking at in the context, the itinerary of what their options are. However, we have not seen at this point in time any port other than the Norwegian ports opening for cruises officially. So at this point in time, nobody knows. And there's no sign of European ports opening. I think one of the big things to watch out for, Michael, is let's watch and see if France signs off the Ponant proposal. They're proposing to sail next month out of France. If France starts opening ports, it means the EU is likely to shift, because obviously France is a key player in the EU. I mean, obviously France is not the EU, but they are a really critical player. If France is comfortable enough to start opening, then I think we'll see some fluidity happening, because France, like France, UK, Spain, Italy, these are all countries that have been pretty badly affected by the whole virus thing. So I would wait, and unfortunately I don't know the answer to that. I think it's very uncertain at this point in time. Personally, I think it'd be very optimistic to even see them doing that. But as we see, things are changing really quickly. I'll answer one quick cruise and then wrap up. Heather's asking me, how many cruises have you taken in your lifetime? I have, at the time of the shutdown, done 76 cruises. This year, I was supposed to have done 14 cruises. I managed to get 2 done. The Mekong, which was phenomenal, and the Panama Canal again, which is another of my big favorite things. So who knows if I'll do any more this year. Hopefully, if it's safe to do, I will definitely be doing that. Thank you very much for joining me on the live cruise. There are probably some other questions here. I will make sure I've got those questions. I'll make sure I'll cover them next time. I wanted to talk about a couple of things really quickly. First of all, as I mentioned, I have the cruise news updates. So some of the questions I can see there, I will cover in the news updates, which I do every single week. I did on Friday last week, but I'm probably going to move it more to probably Thursday. So I'll be posting that. And then up right in about a minute's time is this Sunday's video, which is going to be, well, let me just take, sorry, I've still got, sorry, Heather, I've still got your question up there. The video about to go live in about a minute is cruise booking mistakes. So cruise booking mistakes that could cost you dearly. So clearly a lot of you, as you start to look again at cruising, I've had lots of various questions about cruising. So what I've done is a video around some of the cruising mistakes that I see. So if you want more of me and you want to watch more about cruising, that video is in fact right now it's live on the channel. So thanks so much for joining on the live session. If I didn't answer your question, I will definitely have a look and try and make sure that I cover those either in the cruise news updates one, or I'll make sure that I add them to the list for next week. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend, rest of the weekend, and go and watch some more cruise videos right now. Thank you very much for joining me.